Welcome to Calm Mind English. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you went there? Have you read a page, reached the end, and realized nothing stayed in your mind? A lot of people think this means they have a bad memory, but very often that is not the real problem. Most people do not fail to remember because their brain is weak. They fail to remember because their mind is overloaded, distracted, tired, or rushed. Memory is not only about intelligence. It is also about attention, emotion, repetition, and the way you live each day. That is why some small things disappear from your mind in seconds, while one simple moment from years ago can stay clear forever. Your brain is always choosing what feels important. The question is not only how to remember more. The real question is how to help your brain care. Many people try to improve memory in the wrong way. They push harder. They repeat more. They blame themselves. They say, "I'm just bad at remembering names," or "I always forget what I study." After a while, that story becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a limit. But memory can improve, not through pressure, but through better method, not by fighting your mind, but by understanding how it works. Today, let's talk about how to remember more in real life. Not in a dramatic way, not like a movie genius, just in a clear, practical way that helps your everyday brain work better. The first thing to understand is this. You cannot remember what you never truly noticed. A lot of forgetting begins at the moment of contact. You hear a name, but your attention is already on what to say next. You read a sentence, but your mind is also thinking about work, your phone, your plans, and your stress. Later, you say, "Why can't I remember?" But the truth is, your brain never received a clean signal in the first place. Memory starts with attention. If your attention is weak, your memory will look weak too. This is why people sometimes say they forgot something, when really they never fully focused on it. It is like trying to save a file that was never properly opened. Think about meeting someone at a busy event. They say, "Hi, I'm Daniel." You smile, shake hands, and then immediately think about how you look, what to say, or who is watching. 5 seconds later, the name is gone. Not because your memory is broken, because your attention was divided. So one of the simplest ways to improve memory is to slow the moment down. When you hear a name, repeat it softly in your mind. When you learn one important fact, pause for 2 seconds before moving on. When someone gives you instructions, do not rush to answer. Let the information land. This seems small, but small changes at the start make big changes later. A calm brain remembers better than a rushed brain. The second truth is that your brain remembers meaning more than raw information. Many people try to memorize things that feel empty. Random words, dry facts, long lists with no emotional shape. That is difficult because the brain is not a storage box. It is a pattern-making system. It wants connection. It wants context. It wants something to hold. If you study a word with no image, no use, and no feeling, it often disappears quickly. But if that word is connected to a scene, a person, or a real need, it becomes stronger. Let's say you want to remember the word appointment. You can repeat it 10 times and still forget it. But if you imagine yourself saying, "I have a doctor's appointment at 3 p.m., and picture yourself checking the time, now the word has a place to live. The same happens with daily information. If you want to remember a person's name, connect it to something real. If her name is Lily, maybe you imagine a flower for 1 second. If his name is Mark, maybe you connect it to a notebook mark. It does not need to be perfect. It only needs to create one small bridge. Your memory gets stronger when information stops being flat. This is also why stories are powerful. People often forget advice, but remember a scene. They forget theory, but remember a simple example from real life. The brain likes movement. It likes shape. It likes something it can follow. So when you want to remember something, do not ask only, "How do I repeat this?" Ask, "How do I make this meaningful?" Another important point is that stress quietly damages memory. When people feel anxious, they often become harder on themselves. They forget a detail, then panic. They lose a thought, then get frustrated. They try to remember faster, and suddenly their mind feels even more empty. Stress makes the brain narrow. It pulls your energy toward survival, not calm learning. That is useful in danger, but not useful when you're trying to remember a person's face, an English phrase, or something from a meeting. You may have felt this before in a test, an interview, or even a simple conversation. You know the answer. You studied it. But in the moment, everything goes blank. Then later, when you're relaxed, the answer comes back easily. That does not mean the memory was gone. It means pressure blocked access. So if you want better memory, one part of the work is reducing the panic around forgetting. The more afraid you become, the more your mind tightens. The tighter it becomes, the less freely memory moves. This is why calm repetition works better than emotional self-attack. Instead of saying, "What is wrong with me?" it is more useful to say, "Let me return to it one more time." That small difference changes the whole learning environment inside your head. There's also a big mistake many people make. They confuse exposure with learning. Seeing something once is not the same as owning it. Reading a sentence is not the same as being able to recall it. Watching a video is not the same as remembering the lesson next week. A lot of people spend time around information, but never bring it back out of the mind. That is why they feel busy, but do not feel changed. Real memory grows when you retrieve, not only when you receive. This means after reading something, close the page and ask, "What do I remember?" After hearing a useful idea, try to explain it in your own words. After learning a new phrase, use it in one sentence from your life. That small act of recall is powerful. It tells your brain, "This matters. Keep this available." Imagine reading 3 pages of a book. Many people continue to the 4th page immediately. But if you stop and say, "What were the 3 main ideas?" now your brain has to search. That search is not a sign of weakness. It is part of memory training. In fact, a little difficulty is often good. When recall takes some effort, the memory becomes stronger. Not impossible effort, just enough to wake the mind up. This brings us to repetition. Most people know repetition matters, but they use it badly. They repeat too much in one day, then never return again. Or they review only when they already forgot everything. Memory works better when repetition is spaced. That means you come back to something after a little time has passed, then again later, then again after that. Each return teaches your brain that the information still matters. For example, if you learn 5 useful expressions today, review them tonight for 2 minutes. Look again tomorrow. Use them again 2 days later. Then once more at the end of the week. That pattern is much stronger than reading the same list 20 times in one sitting. This is not only efficient, it is also less exhausting. A lot of motivation dies because people make learning feel heavy. They sit down with too much pressure, too many goals, and too much guilt. Then the brain starts to resist. But when review is light, regular, and calm, memory grows more naturally. One more thing matters a lot. Your environment shapes what you remember. If your phone is always beside you, your mind learns interruption. If you jump between 5 tasks, your brain learns shallow contact. If every study session is mixed with noise, notifications, and rushing, memory formation becomes weaker. This does not mean you need a perfect life. It means your brain needs a clear signal when something matters. Even 10 minutes of focused attention can be more powerful than 1 hour of distracted effort. You can test this yourself. Sit with 1 page, 1 idea, 1 notebook, and no phone for 10 minutes. Read slowly. Write 1 short summary. Say it once out loud. Then move on. You may remember more from that short session than from a long, scattered one. Sometimes memory problems are actually rhythm problems. You're sleeping too little, thinking too much, rushing from one thing to the next, eating fast, scrolling late, waking tired. Then you wonder why names, ideas, and plans do not stay in your head. The brain is not separate from the body. A tired brain is not lazy. It is simply undersupported. Sleep matters more than many people realize. During sleep, the brain organizes, sorts, and strengthens memory. Without enough rest, information stays messy. You may still function, but not clearly. That is why sometimes you study for hours late at night and still feel blank the next day. Your effort was real, but your brain did not get the recovery it needed to process the material well. Water, rest, movement, and quiet also matter more than people like to admit. These things are not dramatic, but they support memory deeply. Many people search for tricks while ignoring the condition of the mind itself. Now let's talk about everyday memory, because this is where frustration often lives. People want to remember names, tasks, where they put things, what they planned to say, what they read, and what they promised. For these daily problems, systems help more than guilt. If you always drop your keys in different places, that is not a memory test. That is a system problem. Give your keys one home. If you forget tasks, do not rely only on the brain. Write them down in one trusted place. If you forget ideas during the day, capture them quickly before they disappear. Using tools does not mean your memory is weak. It means you are smart enough to protect your mind from unnecessary load. Strong people do not try to remember everything with pure effort. They build support around what matters. For example, if you have 3 important tasks tomorrow, do not just hope to remember them. Write them tonight. Put them where you will see them. Make the next action clear. Then your brain can focus on doing, not on carrying fear. This also helps with emotional memory overload. When too many unfinished things stay in your head, your mind feels crowded. You start forgetting simple things because your attention is busy protecting all the things you do not want to lose. Writing things down creates space. It tells your brain, you do not have to hold all of this at once. That relief alone can improve memory. There's another practical rule that helps a lot. Try to reduce passive contact and increase active use. If you're learning English, do not only read words. Use them. If you're trying to remember a lesson, teach it. If you want to remember a person's name, say it in conversation. If you want to keep an idea, connect it to action. Memory becomes stronger when it enters life. Let's say you learn the phrase, take responsibility. If you only read it, it may fade. But if later that day you say, I need to take responsibility for my time, the phrase becomes real. It now has voice, meaning, and personal weight. This is why people often remember what they live more than what they study. So ask yourself, how can I use this today? That question turns learning into retention. Many people also underestimate emotion. Emotion can hurt memory when it becomes stress, but can also strengthen memory when it creates importance. That is why you remember embarrassing moments, deep conversations, painful days, and meaningful encouragement. The brain notices what carries emotional signal. So when learning something useful, attach feeling in a healthy way. Not fear, not pressure, just honest relevance. Why does this matter to me? Where does this fit in my life? Will I use this? Who would benefit if I remembered this well? These questions give memory more depth. Now, let's be honest about something else. Sometimes people say they want better memory, but what they really need is better selectivity. You do not need to remember everything. Trying to hold every detail often creates more confusion. The mind works better when it knows what is important. First, remember the main point, then the structure, then the details. For example, if you read an article, do not try to keep every sentence. Ask for the core message. What was the main argument? What were the 2 or 3 key ideas? If that stays, many smaller details can return more easily later. This makes memory cleaner. Think of it like building shelves before filling them. If the mind has no structure, details fall everywhere. But when the main frame is clear, new information has a place to go. This can help students, workers, parents, language learners, and really anyone who feels mentally crowded. You do not always need more effort. Sometimes you need better order. Let's imagine a simple real-life scene. You are learning something important for work. Maybe a process, a software step, or a list of instructions. You read it once and think, okay, I got it. The next day, half of it is gone. Then you feel disappointed. A better way would be this. Read the steps slowly. After each step, say it simply in your own words. Write only the main keywords. Close the page. Try to recall the order. Later that day, review once more. The next morning, explain it again without looking. This looks slower at first, but it saves time because it actually stays. The same principle works in conversation. If someone tells you something important, do not just nod automatically. Repeat the key part back. Ask one clear question. That short engagement improves memory because the information became active, not passive. The brain likes participation. And here's something that many people need to hear. Forgetting is not always failure. Forgetting is part of the process. Your brain removes a lot because it must. If it held every tiny detail equally, life would feel chaotic. So the goal is not to never forget. The goal is to help the right things return more easily. That change in mindset matters. When people expect perfect memory, they become discouraged too quickly. They review something once, forget part of it, and think it did not work. But partial forgetting is normal. Coming back to it is how it grows. So do not judge progress too early. A person who calmly reviews and recalls over time will often outperform a person who crams, panics, and quits. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. This is true not only for memory, but for growth in general. If you want to remember more, your life may need a calmer pattern. More attention when the information first arrives. More meaning. More spaced review. More active recall. Better sleep. Better systems. Less panic. Less trying to hold everything at once. None of this is flashy, but it works. And maybe that is the deeper lesson here. A strong mind is not always the mind that moves fastest. Sometimes it is the mind that knows how to stay present long enough for life to leave a mark. If you often forget things, do not rush to call yourself weak or incapable. Look more carefully. Maybe you are overstimulated. Maybe you are exhausted. Maybe you were never taught how memory actually works. Maybe your brain does not need shame. Maybe it needs method. That is good news because method can change. From today, you do not need to remember everything perfectly. Just begin by remembering one thing better. When you meet someone, slow down and hold the name for 1 extra second. When you read something important, stop and say in your own words. When you study, return tomorrow instead of trying to finish everything in one sitting. When your mind forgets, do not attack it. Guide it back. Over time, these small actions become a different kind of brain. Not a magical brain, not a perfect brain, a trained brain, a calmer brain, a more reliable brain. And that kind of memory is not built in one moment. It is built in the way you pay attention every day. So if you want to boost your memory, start there. Not with pressure, with presence. Not with fear, with clarity. And not with the impossible goal of remembering everything, but with the wiser goal of remembering what truly matters. A little better each day. That is where real improvement begins. And once that begins, you may realize something important. Your memory was never as hopeless as you thought. It was waiting for a better way.